Hello students, I welcome you to today's class. Our topic for today is Introduction to Poetry. Here you will be learning the meaning of poetry, the various elements of poetry, and also the various types of poetry. It is expected that by the end of this lesson, you should be able to give a detailed definition of poetry, identify the elements of poetry, and also discuss the various kinds or types of poetry. What is poetry? What is the definition of poetry? Poetry has been defined as the extraordinary perception of the ordinary. When you perceive the extraordinary, that is the extraordinary perception of the ordinary. When you look at the ordinary in an extraordinary way. First of all, let's look at the etymological meaning of poetry. From the Greek word, poetry is from the word ponio. The Greek word ponio, and it means I create. So what this means is that poetry is the art of creating. That is, it is the art of writing a poem. So poetry means the art of writing a poem. However, this definition looks too simple. So a poem or poetry can be defined as a form of writing stimulated by emotion. That is, form of writing stimulated by emotion, expressing a deep feeling that cannot be well expressed in ordinary or everyday language. This means that poetry is when you are able to express things. You are able to express your feeling in a way that is different from the ordinary. When you are able to intensify your words, use words in an intensified manner. When you are able to manipulate words, put your writing together, expressing your feeling, beyond the ordinary way of expressing things. So when a poet writes, you write beyond the way an ordinary writer writes. You write beyond the way people ought to have expressed it ordinarily. So poetry goes beyond the ordinary. It is when you express your emotions and feelings in an extraordinary way. Poetry is when you express your feelings and emotion in an extraordinary way. So have a look at what the meaning of poetry is. We must take note that one who writes a poem is called a poet. That is, a writer of a poem is called a poet. One who writes a poem is called a poet. And there is, or if you like, there are some things that distinguish poems from other genres of literature. This is because poems are usually written in verse and stanza, unlike drama that is written in acts and scenes, prose that is written in chapters and paragraphs. Poems are usually written in verse and what? And in stanzas. So let's look at elements of poetry. What are the various elements of poetry? Basically, basically, even though there are others, there are three basic elements of poetry. Three basic elements. And they are imagery, reading, and sound. Imagery is usually defined in literature as the mental picture that a work of art evokes in the mind of the reader. It is the work of art that a work evokes in the mind of the reader. While reading is all about the repeated pattern of sounds in poem. Again, let's look at types of poetry. What are the various types of poetry? There are different types of poetry. So we'll be considering some of them. And these include elegy. Elegy is a poem that expresses sadness for a dead person. It's a poem written to mourn the dead. Again, we have dirge. Dirge is a poem of lamentation. It is usually shorter than elegy. Sometimes some authors confuse or use dirge synonymously with elegy. However, you must take note that dirge is usually shorter, and most often than not, dirge are usually formal. We also have dramatic poetry. This type of poetry is usually with characters and dialogue. So this poetry uses character, dialogue, and action. Another type is ode. Ode is usually addressed to a person or object and some abstract noun. Ode is usually addressed to a person. Ode addressed to a what? A person, object, or abstract noun. Most often than not, ode is usually dedicated to a person. For instance, we have an ode to a nightingale. Usually dedicated to a person. It could be a person, it could be an object, or abstract noun. Let's check types of poetry. What are the various types? That is, we are still looking at the types of poetry now. So, let's go on. We also have epic. Epic is the type of poetry that tells story of a hero. What a hero has done. Maybe in a rural setting, a hero kills a lion. Any poem dedicated to such heroic deed is known as what? Epic. We also have another type of poem, lyrics. Lyrics is a short musical poem. From the word lyrics, you should know that it means a musical poem. Again, we have ballads. Ballads are those poems that tell stories. They are poems that tell what? Stories. We also have pastoral poems. These are poems that usually have rural setting. They are poems that carries out that are usually has rural settings. Sometimes it could be a poem talking about a shepherd, how sheep are taken to what? To the field by the shepherd. We also have sonnet. Sonnet is a poem of 14 lines. It's usually a poem of 14 lines, and most often than not, sonnet is usually broken down into 4, 4, 4, 2. So there are 14 lines. We have 4, 4, 4, 2. They are usually broken down into 4, 4, 4, 2. So let's continue with the types of poetry. I said there are so many. So we also have another type known as idyll. Video is a short, idealized poem. It is all about a simple life. It describes a simple life. Again, we have didactic poem. This is a poem that teaches moral. Any poem that teaches moral is called didactic what? Poem. We also have humorous poems. These are poems that make people to laugh. It causes humor. It makes readers to laugh. We also have panegyric. It helps to praise somebody. Panegyric is a poem that energizes somebody. To praise somebody, to energize. We also have epitaph. This is a poem that is inscribed on a tomb of a person. A tomb is a place where a person is buried. So, an epitaph is that inscription written on a tomb. We also have hagiology. It's also a type of poem that describes life of a saint. There are so many types of poems, so many. We also have lullaby. It is a type of poem that is usually sung by our parents to put babies to sleep. So many types, we cannot exhaust them. So many. So in our next class, we shall be looking at words associated with poetry. We shall be looking at the various words associated with what? With poetry. It is nice having you today. Thank you very much.